Good morning. Welcome to Member Focus Monday. I'm Christina Schaefer, Director of Social Media for HAR. And I am joined this morning by Daniel Bustamante. He is the Executive Director of the Greater Houston Fair Housing Center. Welcome.
Good morning, Christina, and good morning, members of Houston Association of Realtors. Glad to be here.
Thank you so much for taking the time to join us this morning. I know that we're on a limited time with you today. You are very much in demand, and you have another panel that you're going to be on at 9:30 this morning. So we have a lot of questions that we have for you before you get on that panel, though. And I do want to go ahead and tell our members, if you do have questions, please type them in, and we will try to get to them, as many of them as we can. Now, if we could, though, just to start us off, Daniel, if you could tell us a little bit about who you are and what does your organization do?
Well, I'm the founding executive director of Greater Houston Fair Housing, and we're a nonprofit civil rights organization. We're a fair housing initiatives program. We do enforcement and education and outreach for the Federal Fair Housing Act to all communities. Cover 7 protected classes: race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, and familial status. It covers all aspects of housing, private and public, especially housing with federal funds included. It also covers financing, rental and sales. Just about practically every aspect of housing is covered by the Federal Fair Housing Act. And I've been in Houston for over 50 years, originally from South Texas. I came up here to study at the University of Houston, and I met my wife and settled down here. So I'm a proud Houstonian, and I'm glad to be part of this huge boomtown that's full of challenges all the time.
Yes, excellent. And again, thank you for sharing that. And those protected classes that you mentioned should be very familiar to our members. We thought this was a good opportunity to have you on. With April is Fair Housing Month, but you know, the law doesn't change just because April is ending. So we wanted to take some time to sit down with you this morning. You know, one of the comments that we've gotten from members in the past when we've shown them examples of fair housing violations are, that doesn't seem to happen in Houston, or I've never experienced that in Houston. And in my meetings ahead of this with you, you know, we've kind of discussed that this does happen in Houston. So what are some examples of violations that you've seen taken place right here in Houston?
Yes, and I hate to say the following, but Houston is a very segregated city, unfortunately. We do the best we can as a small organization to educate the public, the industry, housing industry, the providers, everybody that we can educate. We just do not have enough enforcement of the fair housing violations that do occur. It's a big city. It's over 7 million people, and a lot of stuff can happen. First of all, it's illegal to not show a property. If somebody comes to see a property, then they have to show a failure to demonstrate a receptive environment for somebody trying to buy a home. There's things that happen in the sales community as well. Steering of clients sometimes to neighborhoods or to properties that are not necessarily the ones that they want to see. Sometimes people get steered to communities where people think they want to live. But some of the more common examples are discrimination just against people when they're seeking housing and being told that it's not available, and when indeed it is available. The biggest areas of concern that we see happening are against families with children and people with disabilities. Everybody's protected, but those two particular classes are the ones that we see quite frequently, disability especially. Houston is a renter city. Majority of people in our city rent. More people do not own a home than own a home. And now with the COVID crisis and everything's going on, everything's being exacerbated. The numbers are getting more disproportionate. Higher percentages of communities do not own homes as opposed to those that do own. So the things that happen could be a differential treatment in services or privileges of living in a community. I know we get a lot of complaints from homeowners that live in communities that have homeowners associations, and many times they'll complain about the homeowners associations and feel that it's indicative of a discriminatory practice. Uh, there's a lot of things that could occur, and especially in communities like Houston that are very diverse and very separated economically. We have in this crisis of COVID, the civil rights problems that we've seen historically have been exacerbated. The COVID crisis has impacted housing in a big way, with the mortgage and the eviction opportunities that are out there. A lot of people are behind in mortgage payments, etc. And so these are issues that are happening, and a lot of times people feel that they're being treated differently and they're not being allowed to follow the same benefits as everybody else. So it's a difficult time right now. Um, Disability is a big concern. Families with children is a big concern. But we still have the traditional people not liking people because of what they look like, the color of their skin, or maybe the language that they speak. So, but I know professional organizations like the Association of Realtors do everything they can to comply and abide. So I'm glad to answer questions that you might continue to ask me today and see what I can do to respond.
Absolutely. Thank you. And this information is so important for our members to hear. As you know, they are out in the field. They're working with renters, buyers every single day, sellers every day. And it's important for them to have this information to take and put into their practice to make sure that we're not doing anything to violate this law. So what is the process for reporting? Because I would imagine that, again, our members may hear of violations from friends, family members, past clients, things like that. So what's the process for reporting? And what are the potential penalties for people who have violated the law?
Well, in our office and most fair housing organizations, people will call in or go online. Right now, COVID, it's more difficult to take phone calls than to take phone calls. So we recommend people go to HoustonFairHousing.org and file their complaints there online. A complaint is made and an intake is done, and the allegation of a housing discrimination complaint is assessed and evaluated to make sure that it's jurisdictional to the law. There are several requirements. Everybody has to be covered by the act, which everybody is. The property itself has to be one of the properties that's covered under the act. Under the Federal Fair Housing Act, all properties that are four or more units, or a property that's a single home that's sold by an agent and a real estate company, or uses media advertising, is covered by the law. So if a property is covered by the law and it's located in our jurisdiction, we'll take that complaint. People have a year from the date of the incident in which to make it, or 2 years from the day of the incident to file a lawsuit. The complaint is made in our office. It's assessed and evaluated by our fair housing specialist. If they feel that it's jurisdictional and in merits investigation, will qualify it to move forward to intake with the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, or the State of Texas, Texas Workforce Commission Civil Rights Division. Occasionally, a matter will come up that requires an attorney, and we don't have an attorney on staff, but we do have consultants and people that work with us, and a lawsuit could potentially be filed. Lawsuits, we have 2 years to do it from the date of the incident, and so that's there. And it's not a quick process, and since we don't have a huge enforcement capability, we move as best we can. So I would say one reason why people don't hear so much about it is simply because it's just such a big dynamic community, and there's so many moving parts, and we're out there as much as possible. We try to focus as much as possible on the population that's potentially being impacted. We're available to do help and train with our partners. Of course, Houston Association of Realtors, we appreciate your professional integrity and your commitment to justice and then fair housing. So we encourage you to continue to do to help people. So we're in a boom market right now for housing, and it's getting harder and harder for people to find housing. Housing is getting more expensive. People that are working people, families with children, and so forth, are having more of a difficult time paying their rent or paying their mortgages. So we're hopeful that the future will bring solutions to all of these crises that we're dealing in, and we can get back to a level playing field like we used to sort of have. So
Yeah, absolutely. How do you respond to people that may believe that violations of fair housing are a thing of the past? Because again, that's some feedback that we've gotten before, is that, well, that doesn't happen anymore. How do you respond to people who might think like that?
People may not be aware of it because it simply doesn't get out in the news, but they do occur on a daily basis. And an example would be a person with disability that's not on social media, doesn't have that capability, has issues, and people many times are not brought before the attention of the public. Uh, but I guarantee you, the social service community, the community that provides help to people in crisis, knows about these problems. There's been an increase in harassment in properties and by individuals who prey on national origin, and particularly Asian Americans have been a problem.
Hmm.
With the crisis of COVID, it's exacerbated the existing tensions between racial lines. There is a racial justice crisis in our country right now, as we can definitely see in the media every day. Uh, so we're very proud of Houston, but we understand that in order to grow healthy and a community that's united, we have to respect each other and protect each other. But it is out there. Uh, people people that are out there looking for housing many times do not complain, and when they do complain, they give up too quick. Not everybody's able to bring it forward. People with disabilities suffer a lot. There's requests for reasonable accommodations and modifications in their housing that many times doesn't happen. It could be a simple ramp or grab bars in the bathroom.
Hmm.
That's another issue that's a continuing problem. Uh, and the family with children can cover a lot of issues. And race discrimination still occurs in our community. People are denied housing based because of their race. We have a lot of barriers with language. A lot of people with limited English proficiency, other languages besides English. We know Spanish is spoken a lot and Vietnamese, but there's 100 other languages
Hmm.
in our community. We're such a diverse city. Uh, so I would say to people that don't hear about it, it's out there, and I'm sure if you look for it, you'll see it. And uh, the way the city's booming right now, that's being gentrified and diversified and changed so much, which is great. And you can live anywhere you can afford, is really the bottom line. If you can't
Hmm.
afford it, you can't live there. So the economic barriers are great in our community, and that creates segregated communities. And on top of that, if people intentionally segregate or try to discriminate, it makes it a lot harder to be a diverse community with open doors for everybody. But we want to create inclusive communities. We want people to be able to work together and live with each other and do everything together as a country that we were meant to be in, and we are. We are the greatest country on earth, and it's because of our laws. And Federal Fair Housing Act is one of those laws, and the civil rights laws that have passed have been there for years, and because of the lack of enforcement, many times things don't appear to exist. But I guarantee you, this last year, there has been more fair housing complaints filed than historically have been filed, and it's increases on an annual basis. And COVID has exacerbated that.
Hmm.
So there are issues in the real estate industry and sales, in the financial community as well, insurance and appraisals. These are all things that are covered under the Federal Fair Housing Act. So
Yeah.
so there is a lot to talk about and to consider.
Okay. So if you're not seeing it, like Danielle said, look, maybe try to look a little deeper because it's there. You've mentioned a few already, but are there any trends in the violations that you're seeing? You've mentioned some things regarding COVID and the social climate. Are there any trends that you're seeing? Again, you said there's more violations in this past year. So what are some of the trends that you're seeing in those violations?
There's an increase in harassment against people in housing. It could be residential housing, like single-family homes or multifamily housing apartments. Particularly in the area of sexual harassment. Sexual harassment has increased exponentially during COVID because more people are stuck in their homes or in their communities. And you see it in the news all the time, but many times it could be harassment of a sexual nature on a female by either a member of that community or maybe somebody that just violating the law. So we've seen that increase, and the women centers are seeing more of it. The police departments are seeing more of it. So we think that that's directly tied because of the COVID crisis and the inability of people to socialize and to see other folks.
Hmm.
The isolation that's going on too has increased complaints from people with disabilities not being able to get the services. Many times they live in a facility that they need an accommodation or a modification and they can't get it, so they continue to suffer. In multifamily properties, I see this a lot where people cannot do simple stuff because of their disability, and an accommodation hasn't been made to allow them to get the benefit of the services.
Mm.
Uh, there is an increase in acts of discrimination against race that has occurred. We've seen what's happened with the Asian community. There's been an increase in hate crimes against Asians in all over the country, and a lot of that happens in neighborhoods and communities. People are just don't like certain people to live with them or next door to them, and
Mm-hmm.
they attack, and it could be a violent outcome. There's been an increase in foreclosures and forbearance of people of color, particularly, and communities not being able to make their mortgage payments. So to get the benefit of the laws and the protections of the laws, many times people feel that they have to file complaints because they don't feel they're getting the full benefit of the financial recoveries that are out there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's been an increase of complaints about people not being able to access many times what they feel are public dollars
Mm.
for getting assistance with their situations through the mortgage crisis. A lot of people are complaining about inability to get refinance, and they feel it's because of who they are and what they look like. Um, there's an increase in situations like that, and people are it's just a very difficult time, but there has been an increase in complaints and situations that occur throughout the country. Um,
Yeah.
there's been some violence in some communities. The Federal Fair Housing Act many times applies on a systemic basis if it happens across the board to a lot of people in a certain community. And we're seeing more and more of that happening throughout the country. So because of the racial crisis, because of the divide and the things that are going on, there's been more people have been more prone to act out their hostilities, and many times that creates dangerous, violent situations in certain communities. And Houston has had historically a lot of issues, and we've always been able to deal with it. We're hopeful that the future will bring more resources to everybody and an ability for people to be able to be sociable and be out again and exchange time with each other and deal with the barriers that COVID has put up. But there has been an increase in a lot of the barriers that have been out there for people to get into housing situations they like to live in. And there's been a flight of people from certain neighborhoods and certain communities because they cannot afford them anymore. So there's an increase of displacement of populations with what's happening with the growth of the city, which is fantastic. I mean, Houston is a boom town. It's always been a boom town, and it's booming now more than ever. And the housing market is booming. So we know that people are trying to find more houses to buy, and many times the market doesn't have the numbers out there that it requires. And there's going to be increased efforts from all populations to go seek housing, and hopefully your members will be receiving anybody that comes in, regardless of the race, color, or sex, or national origin, or anything, and just their
Mm-hmm.
ability to pay. And that's what we like to see. Just
Excellent.
people that are receptive and open and welcoming to all people.
Excellent. We have a question that came in from one of our members, Lisa. And if you have any questions for Daniel, please type them into the comments and we'll try to get in as many as we can. She said, how do you file a complaint against a private citizen? Maybe it's a neighbor harassing potential buyers or for sale by owner, seller / landlord. So is there a process for if it's a private citizen?
No, anybody can make a complaint, private citizens, public citizen, employees of agencies, etc. If a person wants to make a complaint, they can make it anonymously, but it requires an individual to carry it forward. Eventually, somebody's going to get behind the complaint. Many times, our agency will move on a complaint on its own because as an agency, we can do that. Uh, but if there's a neighbor harassing a potential buyer, I think that's a serious matter and it's against federal law. People have a right under federal law to go anywhere in the country and look for housing to buy.
Mm.
It could be a complaint in our office. It could be a complaint directly to HUD or potentially to the Department of Justice. If any member out there sees a situation that indeed is going to be develop into a dangerous climate, it's imperative that it treated with community leaders can possibly intervene, but sometimes law enforcement might have to intervene with harassment because it could turn violent.
Mm-hmm.
Many times the harassment is verbal and non-physical, just words, but people just have to be careful.
Yeah.
Everybody's got a right to live in their home and express themselves and the way they feel.
Yeah, absolutely. A great question here from Lori. You may not be aware, but we've had a lot of safety issues regarding realtors, with consumers. So one of the safety tips that realtors have gotten over the years, and a lot of them have implemented into their business, is they ask for a current photo ID, just a proof of verification of who the person is so that they feel more comfortable going to meet them. Lori asked, since they ask for those photo IDs, have there been complaints from people misunderstanding that as profiling versus, just a realtor trying to protect themselves and having their safety in mind?
Not necessarily for the photo ID itself. I think complaints may come in when people feel like they're requested a certain form of identification that not everybody else is. Maybe somebody
Mm-hmm.
sees somebody come in who's not of their ethnicity or their sex and be given same services without providing a photo ID. But as long as requirements like that are equally applied to everybody, that's the bottom line. But the photo ID is common for most businesses and
Mm-hmm.
to demonstrate you are who you are.
Mm-hmm.
So as long as it's equitably applied and evenly applied, I don't think that would be the people would look at it. Everybody being asked for identification. First of all, everybody should be asked for identification regardless of who they are and on an equitable basis. So just as long as applied it equitably, so
Mm-hmm.
equitably.
Very good. Well, it's good to hear that there's not a spike in complaints regarding that because, again, we've encouraged members to do that. But like you're saying, if you're going to do it for one, do it for everybody. So
And
great
not
tip there.
everybody drives, but I know that the Texas Department of Public Safety has photo IDs for people that don't drive. But
Mm-hmm.
and again, we have to consider people with disabilities and maybe people who don't have that ability to have a photo ID for whatever reason. There might be. Maybe they'll be might be an alternative for a senior or maybe but I get you.
Mm-hmm.
Just as long as it's equitable.
Very good. Thank you. So, as you know, realtors are working with clients in the Houston surrounding areas every single day. What is your advice to our members so they can make sure that they are not in violation of any fair housing law?
Well, I think the best way to avoid problems is to be aware of what the requirements are. I think it's education, and we encourage fair housing education and training. Just recently, I was listening to comments by Mr. Brian Green from the National Association of Realtors in Washington, your national organization. And I was real proud to hear from Mr. Green about the efforts of the National Association of Realtors in developing a training protocol for its members, including all the associations in the country. And they seem to be quite aggressively pursuing it. And it's going to be online. But I think it's training. And our office, from time to time, does training to associations of apartment owners or realtors, etc. And just to try to talk about some of the very specific things that can occur in offices and showing of homes. But the National Association of Realtors, I think, will soon be rolling out more information about this. But it's training. Training
Mm-hmm.
could either be done on site, but now with COVID, it could be online. But I
Mm-hmm.
think it's just being aware of the requirements and asking questions like you are doing right now and discussing it. It could be brought up in your national or regional or local conferences. I'm sure it is. People usually speak or have panels or provide information, but I think information is always necessary, whether it's written or video or however that can be gotten. But it's training. Uh, but I love what I see happening. The partnership that has existed before between the National Association and Houston Association and other associations of realtors and local fair housing organizations, along with community organizations. Because the more people discuss, like we're doing right now, the easier it's going to be to make changes that might be required to move forward in a more unified, progressive, everybody together and trying to solve our problems. But I think it's going to take just a lot of training and a lot of collaborations, a lot of encouragement from all sources. And like I
Excellent.
said, just going into this, I mean, I feel we're in one of the greatest cities in the world in Houston, Texas. I'm real proud of it, and I'm sure all your members are as well. And we're trying to build a community for the future, for our children, for what hasn't been here. And we know that we're the most diverse city in the country right now, with 100 plus languages. We're not New York, we're not LA, we're not some cities, but we are Houston, and the foundation that's being laid. So I think, working together with training, with open doors, having an open mind, and come across as a united community and all on the same page, because it'll be more profitable for any realtor to follow the law than it would potentially be to not follow the law.
Hmm.
The penalties are there, and if you get violations besides the right to sue, that many times can happen. Penalties are fixed at 20 plus thousand for the first violation, and run the 50,000 range for the
Hmm.
second violation, and up to 100,000 if you violate the law several times. And this is on top of damages that the client would normally get for whatever they allege, and attorney's fees, etc. So that's something that people don't want to go there, and it is a law. Unfortunately, the Greater Houston Fair Housing Center is a small civil rights nonprofit. I don't have a team of lawyers, but I guarantee you that that's the goal, and it's always the goal. We work with HUD attorneys as well, and Department of Justice attorneys, and just other folk, and so
Very
I
good.
would say training. It's just training and being better informed and prepared to deal with a barrier that might come up in your ability to serve your clients. And we're here to help. And our website is houstonfairhousing.org. I recommend people go to it and check it out. And if anybody listening wants to contact us about any situation that they feel we might be helpful in, please reach out to us. You have my number. Our number is 713-641-3247. But the best way to reach us is houstonfairhousing.org. And
Excellent.
Christine, I just thank you for allowing me to be here today.
Absolutely. Before I know we are on a time crunch with you, so before we let you go, though, I do want to mention there was a question in the comments about education. I want to remind our members that because April's Fair Housing Month, we did have a fair housing webinar this month. We had NAR had a fair housing webinar as well. We can put the links to some of those in the comments for you if you didn't get a chance to check them out. We also have several webinar series that you can go take a look at, har.com/webinars. We also have an At Home with Diversity course this week. So it's actually only $30 in honor of Fair Housing Month. So take a look at that as well. Danielle, one thing that you mentioned to me last week when we spoke that really stood out is that you're hopeful. Now hearing this new information from you and hearing that there's been a spike in reports over the last year, hearing that you're hopeful really makes me feel good. Why exactly is it that you're feeling hopeful for the future?
Well, I feel hopeful for the future because I talk to people like you and other folk in the community that are leaders in their communities politically or socially. I see the will to do better, to do more, to get more open with ourselves and not be divisive. It is what it is, but I'm hopeful because America, I feel, always responds to the right thing, and Houston is one of those communities that's aggressive, and it doesn't shy from crisis, doesn't shy from problems. So I'm hopeful because I see the positive. I've been here long enough to see what Houston can do. We can move any barrier that's out there, and if Houston wants to do something, they will do it. So I'm very proud of living here and the population that's here. and the professional associations and organizations that represent workers in the housing industry. So I'm just positive, and I know we're in a powerful city, and and it's powerful because of the people that make it up, including everybody watching, and especially all the millions of people that are out there that nobody represents. And I see the faith-based community, the community-based organizations, government professionals responding to needs and hurricanes and explosions and COVID and just the wealth of stuff.
Yeah.
And we have a lot of bad stuff going on, but I think the good will overcome, and we just have to continue to remain positive
Wonderful.
and looking for better days.
Wonderful. Well, we're happy to hear it. Thank you, Daniel, for your time this morning, and thank you to all of our members for tuning in. We'll be back next Monday at 9 a.m. for another Member Focus Monday. Have a great week. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.